Joining us, CNN legal analyst Shan Wu, CNN political analyst Rachel Bade, former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, and CNN legal analyst Laura Coates. So Laura, what's your reaction to this news if, in fact, this plea deal goes forward without necessarily cooperation in terms of providing evidence on other related issues? What does it say to you?
Well, there's three important things to consider with the plea offer. You got information, incentive, and influence. Is there some incentive on behalf of Mueller's probe or somebody in the Southern District of New York who's saying that they would like to give this person an opportunity to plead not to all of the breadth of charges, but to a limited portion of it? And for that, you have to have information that's useful to me in some way as a prosecutor that may influence other cases in some way. And so she was very nuanced in her reporting, and she was right to be, that the idea of it may be that he wants to take a plea offer to less than what they could charge him with. It doesn't mean that they think that he does not have information about the President of the United States, or that they already have things they don't need him for. And so it's going to be a little bit of a give and take about what he can influence in other cases, whether they have an incentive to do so. But ultimately, it's going to come down to what information he's able to provide.
I want to get your analysis, Glenn, as well. But if he pleads guilty to, let's say, a lesser charge, there's no trial, he just pleads guilty, the incentive for him is he might get a reduced sentence as opposed to waiting and going through a long trial.
Yeah, that could be, Wolf, but I'll tell you, I would be surprised if we didn't see Michael Cohen at the end of the day come on board as what we call a global cooperator. I can tell you, as a federal prosecutor practicing here in D.C., I used to have targets of investigations who committed crimes in D.C., they committed crimes in Maryland, they committed crimes in Virginia. So what we would do is all of the prosecutors would get together, we would meet with a target's defense team, and we would reach a global cooperation agreement that would sort of address the crimes that the aspiring cooperator committed in all jurisdictions, and that way the information that the target had to provide would be available to each and every jurisdiction. I understand that there's a lot of give and take going on at the moment, as Laura said, but I strongly suspect at the end of the day, we're going to see Michael Cohen sort of develop into a global cooperating witness.
Shan, let me get your analysis, Rachel, then I'm going to get to you.
I think that's right. I mean, while his lawyers may want to just have a, quote, plea negotiation right now over charges, that's not all that's going on. I mean, the prosecution is going to want to debrief him. They're going to want proffers from the lawyers as to what information, as Laura said, can he give. And as to what Glenn said, they're going to look at this from a global perspective. It's not going to be what it's sounding like right now, which is which charge can we pick and choose to plead guilty to.
Rachel.
Yeah, I just totally seconding all that was said before. I mean, this is a guy who was President Donald Trump's fixer. He knows things about the president that nobody else knows, even people that work every day in the White House. They're, of course, going to want to try to get information from him. Also, one of my colleagues talked to Michael Cohen's lawyer just a couple of days ago, Lanny Davis, and he kept bringing up that he's been in talks with John Dean, who obviously flipped on Nixon during Watergate, saying that he sees parallels with his client's situation, saying that Cohen has seen things that prosecutors potentially would want. So again, I would be just very surprised that if these conversations are not ongoing right now, he clearly knows stuff that they would want to know.
It's interesting, Laura, the Special Counsel Robert Mueller referred this Michael Cohen case to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York in Manhattan instead of doing it himself. And remind our viewers why, because that potentially could be relevant if there is a plea deal.
Well, remember, Robert Mueller has continuously been criticized about the expansive nature of his mandate, that he is trying to pry on issues that are unrelated to collusion with a member of the Trump campaign with Russia. And so he saw an opportunity to have a case that he came across, and he farmed it out. It doesn't mean he can never get any aspect of it back, but what people complain about is the idea, well, he was told to go into a house and investigate a homicide and ignore the mountain of cocaine on the coffee table. The Michael Cohen case is the mountain of cocaine on the coffee table, and he farmed that out. Now, if it turns out there's more information about his underlying mandate, he can retrieve that information. It's not a no backseat sort of situation, but it's interesting to know that he farmed this out, and there is actually some actual comprehensive charge that might come of it, showing that there is some, again, fruit of the labor of the special counsel team.
But the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York works very closely with the special counsel, right?
Exactly. And just because Bob Mueller farmed out a portion of the investigation to the Southern District of New York, perhaps because that portion deals only with taxi medallions, financial crimes that Michael Cohen may have committed in New York, That doesn't mean Bob Mueller all along hasn't retained a great big hunk of the Michael Cohen investigation for himself. The two are not mutually exclusive.
They work very, very closely together. Everybody stand by.